I'm Susu Luen. I'm Member of Parliament for Zawgyi constituency. In Parliament, at the moment, I'm currently the Chief of the Lutto Capacity Building Advisory Group.
I think you're being very modest because I think everybody who sees you will know you as the former First Lady of this country. Well, he's the first democratically elected President of this country, and you have been First Lady. So apart from that, what I would like to ask you is about the responsibilities that you have taken. Maybe you can start from the latest one that you've taken so far.
Recently, one of my assignments was to lead the delegation for the IPA General Assembly, IPA being the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly.
So you just mentioned IPA, the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly. It would be interesting for our audience to hear about your experience. Can you tell us about it?
My first experience was when our country was host, or our parliament was host for the General Assembly, and that was the 37th General Assembly, the 38th IPA General Assembly. That assembly, it was the first time the Indonesian delegation submitted or suggested a draft resolution which targeted specifically the issues in northern Rakhine. And the resolution was, in a sense, condemning us for the non-action in Rakhine. It amounted to allegations of discrimination in terms of religion. These are elements which are far from the actual truth, and it was a resolution which we could not adopt.
So that was the first time a draft resolution was being submitted?
That was the first time. And we felt that it was not only in terms of the inaccuracies of what was being suggested, but because also in principle, we feel that it violates the principle of non-interference. When you target a specific country, it amounts, we believe, to a violation of the principle of non-interference. And so it's not only just for our country, but it's also in terms of the principle itself that we cannot agree to such a resolution. So at 38th General Assembly, the draft resolution was not adopted. Well, at that second time when Rakhine was being targeted as a draft resolution, the other members of the IPA delegations suggested that I should try to explain to them, or that they would like to hear more about the developments that were being undertaken to address the issues, the humanitarian issues in Rakhine.
So how did it go in the end?
Well, in the end, at the executive committee meeting, the other delegation members were much more aware of the developments in addressing the humanitarian issues in Rakhine. And because we had requested the ASEAN Center for Humanitarian Assistance to also support us in our endeavors in addressing the repatriation process, the AHA Center, or the IRAT team. IRAT is the Emergency Response Assessment Team. What we call the AHA IRAT team had already come up with the preliminary needs assessment of the arrangements in northern Rakhine. And quite a number of the IPA delegation members were aware of it, and they were very supportive, and they felt that it was really not necessary for Indonesia to submit this same resolution for the third time. I just wish that the Indonesian IPA delegation would be more in line with the rest of these countries. It's not only us, but also the other countries who are a bit concerned in the way Indonesian delegation has been participating in the IPA meetings.
So we've heard about the AHA IRAT preliminary assessment, and it's been really very positive, and they're moving on to a full assessment, which means it looks good for the repatriation process to begin. And it also sounds like we're getting full support from ASEAN. Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree with it, because I think this is not only a very positive way in which we can show to the world that ASEAN has a really participatory process in terms of addressing the issues within the region. It also, I believe, indicates the solidarity of this region. The outcome of the preliminary needs assessment, I think, is a very professional one. It's quite comprehensive, but a second needs assessment, which I believe will be called a comprehensive needs assessment, will be carried out. And when I say the AHA Iraq team, it includes actually Indonesia as well.
Yeah, so I think that also takes us on to the UN as well, because there has been a tripartite agreement, MOU between UNDP, UNHCR and Myanmar. And that has been signed, and for the second year. And the good news that we've heard quite recently was about the assessment that was being done by UN, and that the reports have been very positive. So what's your opinion on that one?
Well, I'm very happy about it. I just wish that not only through this tripartite, memorandum of understanding, I just wished also that the whole of UN would be able to understand in a much more holistic and comprehensive way in the developments of the repatriation process from our side.
So are you saying that you're not quite happy perhaps with UN's involvement in this country?
Well, I would like for UN to be very much involved. It's not that I'm not happy about UN's involvement. I just wished that it would be involved in a much more efficient and effective way, because at the moment, I believe that in general, it seems to be a very negative attitude on the part of the UN.
Why is that?
Well, maybe I think you may know about Rosenthal's inquiry on the situation in Rakhine. I was quite disappointed with the way the inquiry had been reported.
Well, as far as I can see from the Rosental report, it's very much about a holistic UN reform. And I am just trying to reconcile the whole of UN reform and what is happening in this country. Why is this country singled out to be used as an example? What do you see in that?
It's been quite a number of years that people are discussing the need for a UN reform. It would be tremendously beneficial if there was such a reform. But the way in which this UN reform should be conducted, because the United Nations is a huge multilateral organization, and it is a very important organization for the whole of the world. And if only they could be much more effective and efficient, I think it would mean a great deal for developing countries like ours. But sometimes I think there's also this case where people do not give that much, how should I say, notice to the fact that the coffers of the United Nations are actually the taxpayers' money of donor countries. Because of that, the resources that UN has should be used very thoughtfully in a way which the beneficiaries can actually benefit from the programs or initiatives that are being implemented in the countries like ours.
So in the Rosental report, he talks about robust advocacy, he talks about quiet diplomacy. And it's like he's trying to say the quiet diplomacy does not work. And he seems to be implying that the robust advocacy might be the way to go. What would you like to see happening for this country where UN is concerned?
He discusses the pros and cons of this robust and outspoken advocacy as well as quiet diplomacy or principled advocacy. He's used these terms. There's no right or wrong approach. There's no merit, actually, in analyzing the approach, the approach for UN in such a way. I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. The principles on which the UN was founded, the UN Charter, I think, is the basis for all UN efforts. And so I think there's only one way for the UN, and that is to be fair and just and to respect the articles that are enshrined in the United Nations Charter. And I pray that the UN would really become more serious in trying to close the gaps between how their programs are implemented in the field and how the reports that they receive have gaps in terms of their objectives, their ideals, and what actually happens in the field. Sometimes there may be achievements, but sometimes there may not be any achievements. Some of the realities are often not reported in the actual reporting. So I'm very concerned about this. And I talk about this from my own 15 years of experience as a UN staff member.
What is your hope for UN? What is your hope for this country?
You have to understand that the UN operations, the projects and programs, are actually implemented in the field by professionals in their own right because they are also international civil servants and they are careerists. So they need to develop in terms of their career. I think although one can understand that this is the case, people who are working for the UN need to be assured that reporting the truth is something that they will not be penalized for or that would not affect their career development. I think if that can be the case, I say this as an ex-UN staff member. There are a lot of fear by staff members that what they report might not be taken positively.
So on that note, thank you so much for your time, your patience in explaining to us. Thank you very much. It's been an honor.
Thank you.